dying from a poison only her kind knows. She froze when the human cut his own palm. Offering a cure, Kiara's breath came in shallow gasps as she stumbled across the barren landscape of the human colony. The once vibrant city was now a shadow of its former self, dust clouds swirling in the air. The sun, a distant orange orb, beat down relentlessly, but it wasn't the heat that made her skin burn. It was the poison. She had known the risks when she accepted the diplomatic mission to this remote human world. The humans had little understanding of her species, and her presence here was meant to foster goodwill. But now, standing on the edge of a decaying world, Kiara felt the venom spread through her body. The poison was unique to her kind, an ancient toxin that worked swiftly, paralyzing the body and shutting down vital systems one by one. Her eyes blurred as the pain intensified, but she had no choice but to keep moving. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing louder than the last. She could feel the poison coursing through her veins, a cold, tightening grip that made every step more difficult than the last. She was running out of time. As the poison began to overtake her, Kiara's thoughts grew hazy. She knew the cure wasn't on this planet. No human could help her, not with their limited medical knowledge. The only hope she had lay within the distant reaches of her home world, a place far beyond human reach. But it would take too long to send for help, and by then it would be too late. Kiara's legs buckled beneath her, and she fell to her knees, the world spinning around her. The scorching sun above seemed to mock her helplessness. She couldn't even call for help. Her throat was closing up, the venom slowing her ability to speak, to move, to live. She had underestimated the poison. The ancient toxin that only her people knew of was unlike anything the humans could comprehend. It had been used in a war long ago, a weapon that had brought entire armies to their knees. And now it was killing her. As she struggled to breathe, the realization struck her. There was no escape. She would die here on this forsaken world, and the humans would never understand why. They wouldn't even know she was gone. Kiara closed her eyes, trying to block out the dizziness threatening to overwhelm her. And then she felt it, a hand on her shoulder. The touch was unexpected, gentle, warm. She hadn't expected anyone to find her in this desolate place, especially not him, Ethan. The human had been with her throughout the mission, a quiet, observant traveler who had never seemed to care much about the politics or the intricacies of her species. He had simply offered his help when needed, always present but never intrusive. She had never expected him to care, not truly. Humans were so different from her people, fragile, short-lived, and in her mind insignificant. But now, as she looked up, her blurry vision making it difficult to focus, she saw Ethan kneeling beside her. His expression was one of concern, his brow furrowed as he took in her condition. The poison was already claiming her, but Ethan didn't seem afraid. Instead, he seemed determined. Kiara tried to speak, but her voice was nothing more than a rasp, a whisper in the wind. Her strength was fading fast. Ethan's hand remained on her shoulder, steadying her. Don't try to speak, just focus on breathing. She wanted to push him away, to tell him that this was no place for him, that his life was too precious for this, but the words wouldn't come. All she could do was watch as his face filled with a mixture of fear and determination. He wasn't going to leave her. "You're going to be okay," he said, though the uncertainty in his voice made it clear he didn't believe that himself. "I won't let you die here." Kiara tried to shake her head, but the effort only made her vision blur further. She wanted to tell him it was hopeless, that he couldn't save her, that he didn't even know what kind of danger he was in by getting this close. The venom was a part of her, and it would kill her, slowly and painfully. If she had even the smallest chance of surviving, it lay with her species, ancient knowledge, not the primitive medical practices of humans. But Ethan wasn't listening. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small device, the kind humans used for emergency medical aid. He applied it to her wrist, scanning her vitals, his brow furrowing deeper as the device beeped erratically. "Shit," he muttered. "This isn't good." Kiara's vision blurred even further, the edges of her consciousness growing dim. She felt herself slipping away, her body growing heavier, her limbs like lead. The world around her was fading. "Stay with me," Ethan said, his voice firm, though there was a tinge of panic beneath it. "I won't let you die, just hold on." But how could she hold on? She was already too far gone. She could feel the poison moving through her body, shutting down her organs one by one. Her heart, her lungs, her mind. It was all slipping away, and Ethan couldn't stop it. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Don't! Ethan didn't let her finish. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her with surprising strength despite the weight of her alien form. I'm not leaving you. Kiara couldn't speak anymore. She had no energy left to resist. She just let her head rest against his chest, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. She could hear his heart beating steadily, the rhythm a reminder of how fragile humans truly were. He was doing the impossible, trying to save her when there was no chance. Her thoughts were fading, but before she slipped into unconsciousness, she heard Ethan's voice again, barely more than a whisper. I don't care if I don't understand you, Kiara. I don't care if I don't know what this poison is. I'm not leaving you. I'm going to help you somehow. And then the world went black. Ethan carried Kiara as best as he could, her body limp in his arms. The heat of the day had drained him of much of his energy, but his will to help her kept him moving. He wasn't sure how long it would take to get back to the human settlement, but he didn't care. He had to get her there to get her to safety. It was all he could focus on. Every now and then, he could feel her body shudder, a faint tremor as the poison continued to work its way through her. Kiara had been the one to warn him about her condition when they first arrived on this planet, but he hadn't truly understood the depth of it until now. She hadn't shared the details, only telling him that she was more vulnerable than the average alien, that her species had an old weakness, a venom that only they knew how to cure. A poison so deadly, it could take her life in mere hours if untreated. But what was the point of being told about such a thing if there was no way to stop it? Kiara had never expected him, a simple human traveler, to understand. Humans were fragile, as she had put it, and were often dismissed by those who had far more advanced technology. And why would she think otherwise? He was a stranger on her mission, a mere bystander. But even now, as he struggled to support her, he couldn't accept that he might not be able to do anything. He reached the settlement after what felt like hours, though he wasn't sure how much time had actually passed. The colony's medical facilities were basic, not equipped for anything too serious. But the people there had offered supplies and shelter to him when he first arrived. They weren't going to let him down now. He pushed through the doors of the clinic, nearly colliding with a doctor who had been passing by. The man's eyes widened in surprise when he saw Kiara in Ethan's arms. Without a word, Ethan hurried toward one of the examination rooms, his legs aching but still carrying Kiara with urgency. Get the med unit ready, he called to the doctor, who followed closely behind him, his hands moving quickly as he prepared for the emergency. She's been poisoned, her species, he trailed off, unsure how to explain something so complicated in such little time. Take it easy, the doctor said calmly, though the concern in his eyes betrayed his outward composure. Let's get her on the table first. Ethan helped the doctor lay Kiara down. He stepped back, his hands still trembling from the effort and the fear that was mounting in his chest. He didn't know what else to do. He didn't know if the clinic's equipment could do anything for her. The poison wasn't something any of them were trained to handle. The doctor worked quickly, but his face soon turned pale as he read the device's data. He didn't say anything at first, but Ethan could see the concern on his face growing with every passing second. Doc, what's going on? Is she going to be okay? Ethan asked, his voice tight with anxiety. The doctor hesitated before speaking, clearly unsure how to proceed. This poison, it's not something I've ever seen, not in humans, not in any alien species we've encountered. It's unique to her species, as you said. There's nothing in our database that matches it. Ethan clenched his fists. His mind raced, but he didn't know what to think. He felt utterly powerless. Is there nothing you can do? Ethan's voice cracked, frustration bubbling up inside him. I can try to stabilize her, the doctor said, but without knowing more about the toxin, I can't promise much. He paused and glanced at Ethan, his eyes full of hesitation. Maybe someone from her species could. Kiara let out a weak gasp, cutting him off. Her eyes fluttered open and she blinked up at them, her gaze distant and unfocused. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He rushed to her side, taking her hand gently. Kiara. Can you hear me? He asked softly. Her lips parted, but the words didn't come. She blinked again, her breathing shallow, and for a moment it seemed like she might slip away entirely. Ethan squeezed her hand, not knowing what to say. There was nothing he could do. He wasn't a healer, a scientist, or even someone who could comprehend the advanced biology of another species. But he had to try. For her, for everything she had done for him during their time together. Ethan looked at the doctor. Isn't there anything you can do? The doctor looked back, his expression heavy with regret. If we had more time, more knowledge, maybe, but we don't have enough to go off of. His words hung in the air, as if he, too, was already resigned to the fact that Kiara might not survive. You said there's a cure for this. What kind of cure are we talking about? Kiara's weak voice broke through. The cure is dangerous to you. Her words were labored, but she still spoke with that quiet strength, as if trying to keep Ethan from making any rash decisions. She struggled to sit up, but the poison held her down, making her body weak and uncooperative. What do you mean? Ethan asked, stepping closer to her. She closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering the strength to explain. It's not a simple antidote. It requires, she coughed, her voice faltering. Blood, my blood needs to be exchanged. Blood, Ethan repeated, confused. What do you mean? How can your blood help? Not just my blood, Kiara whispered, her voice growing fainter. Your blood mixed with mine, it can stop the poison, but it's risky. It's never been done with humans before. Ethan's mind reeled. She wanted him to do what? He wasn't an expert in medicine, but he understood enough to know that blood exchange, especially between two entirely different species, could be lethal. But he couldn't leave her here, not like this. Not when there was a chance to save her. Kiara, he began, unsure of how to ask the question that weighed on his mind. Are you sure about this? I don't want to do something that could hurt you or me, but if there's a chance. Her eyes met his, her expression desperate but also filled with something else, a deep, almost painful understanding. It's the only way, you must trust me. Ethan took a deep breath. There was no time left to waste. If she was right, this was the only chance they had. He wasn't going to let her die, not like this. All right, he said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty he felt. I trust you. The doctor watched them both carefully, his hands still working to keep Kiara stable. I'll prepare the tools, he said, knowing he couldn't stop them but still uneasy about the potential consequences. Ethan looked down at Kiara, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea if this would work, if it would even save her life, but he couldn't back down now. Not after everything. As the doctor readied the medical equipment, Ethan gently rolled up his sleeve, the weight of the moment sinking in. Kiara's eyes flickered toward him, gratitude and something else, something deep shining through. He wasn't just saving her life. He was offering her something far more profound than that. Ethan reached out to take Kiara's hand again, the bond between them now undeniable. The stakes were high, but in that moment, he knew he would do whatever it took to keep her alive. Ethan watched as the doctor prepared the sterile medical tools, his mind racing. He had no idea how this would work, whether Kiara's plan would even save her. But there was no other choice. He couldn't let her die, not like this. The air in the room felt heavy as Kiara lay motionless on the medical table. Her breathing was shallow, each breath a struggle. The poison was still working its way through her body, and Ethan could see the signs of it. Her skin had taken on an unnatural pallor, and her body trembled faintly with each passing second. Time was running out, but the human clinic wasn't equipped for this kind of situation. Nothing here could help her except what she had just explained. Blood exchange. Her species' ancient remedy, a process so dangerous that it had never been attempted with humans. Ethan glanced at the doctor, who was now focusing on preparing the blood transfusion equipment, still quiet but clearly uneasy about the procedure. It wasn't that the doctor didn't want to help. It was that, like Ethan, he didn't fully understand what they were attempting. Blood from two different species, one of them human, wasn't something that could be done lightly. The risks of rejection, infection, and complications were enormous, but there was no time to second-guess. Kiara needed him now. I'm ready, Ethan said, though the words felt hollow. He couldn't hide the nervousness in his voice. He was used to handling dangerous situations. Humans did that often enough. But this was beyond anything he had ever dealt with. The doctor gave a hesitant nod, glancing at the tools in his hands. All right, let's proceed carefully. Ethan positioned himself next to Kiara, his heart racing as he reached for her hand. Her eyes met his, her gaze still weak but steady. Are you sure this will work? Ethan asked quietly. He wasn't afraid to admit it now. He was scared of losing her, scared of failing her. I told you, Kiara whispered, her voice barely audible, it's the only way. Her words had a weight to them, an authority that Ethan couldn't ignore. She knew what she was talking about, even if the process seemed absurd to him. His blood, mixed with hers, was supposed to be the antidote. It didn't make sense, but he had to trust her. He bent down, gently brushing her hair away from her forehead, his fingers trembling despite his efforts to remain steady. She was so fragile right now, so vulnerable. A far cry from the strong, determined diplomat he had first met. He had seen her fight through difficult situations before, always calm and composed. But now she was depending on him. It hit him like a punch to the gut, the weight of what he was about to do. The doctor's voice broke through his thoughts. "We'll start with a small amount of blood from you first. We'll need to make sure the transfusion is accepted by both your systems before we proceed with a full exchange." Ethan nodded, his mouth dry. He wasn't sure what he was more nervous about, whether the transfusion would work or whether Kiara would survive the procedure. But there was no turning back now. The moment he had agreed to this, he had committed. He just hoped that whatever would happen next, it would be enough. The doctor inserted a needle into Ethan's arm, and for a brief moment he felt a sharp sting. The sight of the needle drawing blood was oddly calming in a way. It was something he had done countless times before, a routine he could handle. But this was different. This blood wasn't just for any transfusion. It was for Kiara, for her survival, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Ethan looked over at Kiara as the doctor carefully prepared to administer the first small portion of his blood. Her eyes were closed, and she looked almost serene despite everything. Maybe it was the poison still coursing through her veins that made her so still, or maybe it was the sheer exhaustion of trying to stay awake that kept her quiet. But for a moment, she looked peaceful. Ethan wished he could ease her pain, take away the fear that must have been creeping in the back of her mind. As the blood from his arm slowly made its way into Kiara's system, the room fell into a tense silence. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, each thrum reminding him that he was in this, that he had made this choice. After what felt like an eternity, Kiara stirred slightly. Her fingers twitched, and for the first time in hours, she seemed to breathe a little easier. Her chest rose and fell with more regularity, and the color in her face started to return. Ethan held his breath, watching her closely, but the doctor didn't seem to be reacting. "It's too soon to tell," the doctor murmured, his eyes still scanning the equipment. "We need to give it time." But Ethan saw it. The subtle change in Kiara's features, the faint rise of color in her cheeks, the slight softening of her tense posture. She wasn't out of the woods yet, but there was a glimmer of hope. Is she going to be okay?" Ethan asked, his voice small, as though speaking the words aloud might break the fragile moment. "We'll see," the doctor said noncommittally, but there was a faint spark of optimism in his eyes. "If her body accepts the blood, we may be able to proceed with the full exchange soon." Ethan nodded, although he didn't feel reassured. His mind was still racing. What if this wasn't enough? What if her body rejected it? What if the poison was already too far advanced? He couldn't think like that. He had to believe in this, in Kiara's plan. He had no choice but to hold on to hope. The next few minutes felt like hours. The doctor continued to monitor Kiara, checking her vitals and ensuring that Ethan's blood was flowing correctly into her system. Kiara was still unconscious, but there was a calmness to her now, a steadiness that had been absent before. Ethan couldn't help but feel a little lighter with each passing moment. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the doctor spoke again. "She's stabilizing. Her body is accepting the transfusion. I think we can proceed with the full exchange now." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The worst was over, but the hardest part was yet to come. He glanced down at Kiara, still weak but now breathing steadily. This was really happening. This was his chance to save her. The doctor gave him a nod of approval, but his expression was still serious. "The full exchange is risky. We'll need to be cautious. If either of you experiences any complications, we'll need to stop immediately." Ethan nodded grimly. "I understand." Without another word, the doctor started setting up the necessary equipment for the full blood exchange. Ethan stood next to Kiara, his eyes fixed on her, his hands trembling slightly as he braced himself. This was it. This was what it all came down to. As the doctor worked, Ethan thought back to everything that had led him here. The long journey to this planet, the way Kiara had never given up on her mission, the trust they had built over time. It had all led to this moment. And now, Ethan was about to do something he never could have imagined. A human giving blood to an alien, saving her life in a way he never thought possible. His thoughts were interrupted as the doctor finished setting up the final piece of the procedure. Ethan took a deep breath and turned back to Kiara. She was still unconscious, but her body had already started responding. He could see it in her face, in the way her breath had evened out, the way her body seemed to be relaxing. The worst of the poison was behind her, and now they just needed to make sure the blood exchange worked. Ethan stood by, ready to give her the last part of the cure. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, but he also felt something else. A deep sense of responsibility. He had made the decision to help her, to risk his own life for hers. And now, no matter the outcome, he would see it through. "Let's do this," he whispered to himself before nodding at the doctor. Ethan's pulse raced as the procedure continued. The sterile room was filled with a quiet tension, only broken by the soft beeping of medical equipment monitoring Kiara's vitals. He stood next to her, every movement deliberate, every breath sharp in his lungs as he waited. He had never felt so helpless, yet so resolute at the same time. His blood was flowing into her, and there was nothing more he could do but hope and trust that it would work. Kiara's body was slowly accepting the transfusion, but the process wasn't without its risks. Ethan could feel his own heart pounding as he watched her. The poison had already done its damage. Her skin, though no longer pale, still had a strange, ashen undertone. Her once vibrant eyes were still closed, though there was the faintest twitch of movement beneath her eyelids as if she were aware of what was happening. The doctor continued to monitor the process, his face drawn in concentration. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, adjusting the equipment as he checked the readings on the monitors. He'd kept quiet for the most part, but Ethan could see the glimmer of hope in his eyes despite his calm exterior. The poison was retreating. Slowly, but it was retreating. "How's she doing?" Ethan asked quietly, unable to break the silence any longer. His voice sounded small in the large room, but his concern was unmistakable. The doctor glanced at the readouts again before looking back at Ethan. "Her vitals are stabilizing, the blood exchange is working, slowly, but she's holding steady." Ethan nodded, though the weight on his chest didn't lift. She was still in danger. The poison had done its damage, and he knew it wasn't over yet. His blood was coursing through her now, but there was no guarantee this would be enough. The human body was not meant to interact with alien physiology like this. What if something went wrong? What if Kiara rejected the blood, or worse, if the poison was too far ingrained in her system? He couldn't think like that. He had made his decision, and now he had to see it through. As the moments ticked by, Ethan stayed at her side, keeping his focus entirely on her. He watched her closely, looking for any signs of improvement. Her chest rose and fell more evenly now, and there was a subtle shift in her face. The tightness that had once held her features in a constant grimace seemed to have loosened, even if only slightly. Her skin wasn't as clammy as it had been before. It wasn't the full recovery she needed, but it was a sign. The doctor made a few more adjustments to the machines, his eyes flicking to the monitor in front of him. "It looks like we're nearing the halfway point. If she keeps responding this well, we'll be able to finish the exchange." Ethan's throat was dry, and the weight in his chest felt like it was doubling with each passing second. He couldn't help but feel anxious, like he was waiting for a ticking clock to run out. They were close, but he knew it wasn't over until Kiara was fully recovered. She had almost died, and the thought of losing her now, after everything he had done to help her, was unbearable. A soft, almost imperceptible sound broke through the air, Kiara's voice. It was faint, barely more than a whisper, but Ethan heard it. "Ethan!" He leaned closer, his heart skipping. She had spoken his name. She was aware she was waking up. "Kiara!" he said, his voice soft but filled with urgency. He reached out to touch her hand, his fingers brushing against her cold skin. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, and for a moment Ethan could see the confusion in them. Her pupils dilated as she tried to focus on him, but there was a dullness in her gaze, as though she were struggling to fully regain consciousness. "Ethan!" she repeated, her voice hoarse but now stronger. He smiled in relief, though it was tinged with anxiety. "I'm here, Kiara. You're going to be okay. Just hang on a little longer." Her eyes shifted to the IV drip connected to her arm, and she grimaced slightly. She seemed to understand what had happened, but she was still too weak to speak clearly. The pain from the poison had clearly taken its toll, and she wasn't fully in control of her body yet. But she had woken up. That was enough to give Ethan hope. "Did it work?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the weight he felt pressing on his chest. "It's working. Your body is starting to respond to the transfusion." Kiara tried to move, but her body was still too weak. Ethan gently placed his hand on her arm, urging her to stay still. You need to rest. You've been through a lot. She nodded weakly, her eyes closing again, but this time there was a sense of peace in her expression. The poison was still inside her, but it wasn't winning anymore. For the first time in hours, there was hope. The process had begun, and it had worked. Kiara was going to survive. The doctor stepped forward, observing her closely. She's stable for now. We'll need to keep monitoring her for the next few hours, but the worst is over. Ethan's shoulders sagged in relief. So she's going to make it? It's too soon to say for certain, the doctor replied, his voice careful. But the signs are good. The blood exchange seems to be helping her body fight off the poison. If it continues like this, she'll recover. Ethan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He wanted to believe the doctor, wanted to cling to the idea that Kiara would be okay. But a part of him still worried. The bond between them wasn't just something physical. It was something deeper, something beyond what words could explain. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her now, not after everything. The room fell into a quiet rhythm, the only sounds now the soft hum of medical equipment and the occasional beep from the monitors. Kiara's breathing had become more regular, but she was still unconscious, though not as deeply as before. Ethan stayed by her side, watching over her, hoping, praying that the worst was truly behind them. Time passed slowly. The hours stretched out like they had all the time in the world, but Ethan knew better. Time was precious, and every second was a reminder that they couldn't afford to waste any of it. Kiara stirred again, her face twitching in discomfort. Ethan leaned in closer, brushing the hair from her forehead gently. "It's okay, Kiara," he murmured. "You're safe now. Just relax." Her eyelids fluttered open again, and this time she focused on him with more clarity. Her voice was still faint, but it had the strength of someone who had fought their way back from the edge of death. "You saved me." Ethan nodded, a slight smile tugging at his lips, though his eyes were still filled with relief. "You saved yourself, Kiara. I was just the one who helped. You were strong enough to pull through." She looked at him, her gaze intense, as though she were seeing him for the first time. There was a gratitude in her eyes, but there was also something deeper, a connection, a bond that neither of them had expected. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice soft. "You don't have to thank me," Ethan replied. "We're in this together." And as he sat there, holding her hand, watching over her as the hours slipped away, he realized that what they had shared wasn't just a life saved. It was something more, a deep, unspoken understanding between two beings from entirely different worlds. He wasn't sure what the future would hold, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The hours passed slowly as Ethan remained at Kiara's side. The quiet hum of medical equipment and the soft rustle of the room's ventilation system, the only sounds filling the sterile air. Kiara's condition had improved steadily, but Ethan's anxiety hadn't lessened. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but the thought that the poison could still make a comeback hung over him like a cloud. Every time Kiara stirred, every time her chest rose and fell with a more even rhythm, he felt a flicker of hope, but also a spark of fear. She had been so close to dying, and though her body was beginning to fight back, it still felt fragile, too fragile. The realization of what had almost happened kept him on edge, not fully able to let go of the tension in his chest. She was alive now, but he knew better than to believe that meant everything was okay. Kiara's eyes opened again, this time more alert than before. The bright blue of her gaze met his, and he felt a flicker of relief wash over him. She had been unconscious for much of the past few hours, only occasionally stirring in response to the procedure. Now, though, she was awake and seemed to be processing her surroundings. Her gaze shifted from Ethan to the equipment around her and then back to him. Her lips parted, but her voice was weak, almost a whisper. "Ethan," she paused as if gathering the strength to speak. "Is it over?" He smiled softly at her, still surprised by the change in her. "It's over, Kiara. You're going to be all right." There was a deep sense of gratitude in her eyes, but also a flicker of confusion, as though she were unsure whether to believe him. The poison had been so powerful, so close to taking her, and for a moment it seemed almost impossible that she could be recovering so quickly. But she was, and that fact filled Ethan with a sense of wonder he couldn't shake. Her brow furrowed slightly. "I don't understand." How did you save me?" Ethan's smile faltered, his words catching in his throat for a moment. He hadn't expected her to ask that question not so soon. She had been unconscious through most of the procedure, and now she was trying to process what had happened. The answer was simple enough, but the depth of it was something he wasn't sure he was ready to explain. "I just did what had to be done," he said quietly, though the truth of it was deeper than that. He had put his life on the line for her, offered something of himself to save her. It wasn't just about blood or medicine, it was about trust. Trust in each other, trust in something bigger than both of them. Kiara's eyes softened as she took in his words. She nodded slowly, as if understanding something profound that went beyond what he had said. The connection between them was undeniable now. It wasn't just physical or even biological. It was something that had transcended their species, a bond formed out of shared sacrifice and survival. Ethan sat back slightly, his eyes never leaving her. The doctor had left the room a little while ago, giving them space now that Kiara was stabilizing. The sound of footsteps outside the door let him know that they weren't entirely alone, but for now it was just the two of them. It felt strange. He hadn't really had time to think about everything that had happened until now. It was as if his mind had been in a haze, caught between survival and the overwhelming sense of responsibility that had driven him to save her. "I thought I was going to die," Kiara said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I'd never see another sunrise." Her eyes darkened for a moment and her face was filled with something he couldn't quite name. Regret, fear, maybe both. "I never thought that a human could save me." Ethan's heart sank at the words. He didn't like the way she spoke about it, as if she had given up, as if she had already accepted the inevitable. He had seen her strength, seen how determined she was to hold on. The thought that she had been ready to die, that hurt more than anything. "You didn't give up, Kiara," he said gently. "You fought. You're alive because of you, not just because of me." Kiara looked at him for a long moment, as though weighing his words carefully. Finally, her lips curved into a faint smile. It was weak, but it was a smile nonetheless. "Maybe," she said softly, "but you were the one who helped me. You didn't have to, but you did. I thought humans were fragile, that you would never understand." "But you," her voice faltered and she swallowed hard. "You're stronger than I thought." Ethan wasn't sure what to say to that. He wasn't strong, not like she was. She was an alien, capable of things he could never imagine. But in that moment, when she looked at him with those eyes, eyes that had seen more than he would ever understand, he realized that strength wasn't just about physical power. It wasn't just about surviving or fighting. It was about compassion, about stepping up when no one else would, about seeing the humanity in someone else even when it seemed impossible. And in that moment, he saw something in Kiara that he hadn't before: vulnerability. The alien woman who had seemed so invincible, so untouchable, was as human in that moment as he was. They both carried wounds, both physical and emotional, that no one could fully understand unless they had walked in the same shoes. But they had walked together now through the worst of it. "I didn't save you alone," Ethan said after a moment, his voice steady. "We saved each other." Kiara's smile grew slightly, but there was a wistful sadness behind it. "Maybe. But I've never met a human like you before, Ethan. I thought you were just a traveler, just passing through. But now I think I've been wrong about humans. You're not just fragile, you're stronger than you know." Ethan felt his heart swell at her words. He had always seen humans as weak in the eyes of other species. In the galaxy, they were often overlooked, dismissed, seen as insignificant. But Kiara, who had faced the poison and survived, who had seen so many horrors in her own life, was telling him that he was stronger than he knew. It made him feel something deep, something he couldn't fully explain. A gentle silence hung between them. They didn't need to say anything more. The bond between them was clear now, stronger than anything either of them could have imagined. Kiara's strength, Ethan's resilience, it wasn't just about survival. It was about understanding, about bridging the gap between two species that had once seemed so different. But now, standing together in the aftermath of the storm, they were no longer strangers. They were allies, partners, survivors. The door to the room opened quietly and the doctor stepped in, glancing at the two of them. "She's stable now," he said with a smile, though it was small. "I think it's safe to say you've pulled through, Kiara." Kiara nodded, but the faint smile on her face didn't fade. She met Ethan's gaze one last time before looking at the doctor. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady now, full of gratitude. "I never thought I'd make it, but I did." The doctor looked between the two of them, his expression softening. "It wasn't just me," he said. "It was both of you." Ethan nodded, a quiet agreement passing between him and the doctor. They had saved Kiara together, and in some strange, unspoken way, Kiara had saved him too. She had changed his perspective on everything, on life, on humanity. The doctor turned to leave, but Kiara's voice stopped him. "Ethan," she said, her tone suddenly serious, "when I'm well again, we need to talk." Ethan met her gaze, his heart skipping a beat. There was something in the way she said it, something heavy in her words. He didn't know what the future held for them, but he knew one thing: whatever it was, they would face it together. "I'll be here," he said simply, "whenever you're ready." As the doctor left and the room quieted again, Kiara's hand found his. The world outside could wait. For now, they were here, together, alive, and with the promise of something new between them, something that neither of them could have anticipated. And whatever came next, they would face it as partners, as survivors, bound by a connection that transcended the stars.